Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about something very important, and I feel like people that are practicing law of attraction and start to get into self-development and self-improvement and everything like that, there is a trap that you can fall into once you start to kind of go down the rabbit hole. And I want to kind of talk about this, how it relates to just everything in life, but in particular dating. So there's kind of a trap you can fall into when you begin to understand that you are a divine being experiencing a human experience and that your soul is infinite or whatever you happen to believe. And when you start to get these comforting thoughts from Abraham Hicks or Wayne Dyer or any of the spiritual people out there, and you start to really get into it, it's easy to kind of look at other people who are just beginning their journey, or they're on a different journey, a different level of awakening. It's easy to get a spiritual ego. And what I mean by spiritual ego is when you start to think that you can play mind games with people because you're more woke than everyone else, or you can use your knowledge that you've gained, that you believe to be true, to sort of think you're better than other people. And it happens sometimes without you noticing it. So it's normal, because if you're aware of it, you can begin to ground yourself again. Some people are so spiritual, woo-woo, up in the clouds, that they inevitably end up too far up, and it ends up having a backlash, into deviant behavior, lying, manipulation, kind of disassociation. Because no matter what anyone says, you have to have your ego. You have to be in this human experience as well. So no matter what you believe in, whether you believe in God or, universe or consciousness, whatever you believe in, whatever religion, whatever spiritual practice you have, you still have to be grounded and be present in day-to-day life. That's what mindfulness is. So sometimes when you're dating as a spiritual person or somebody of faith or whatever you want to call it, what can happen is someone will resonate with you on a high level because they have that same level of spiritual awareness and things like that. But the key is that if you only look at that, you may overlook some warning signs. I know I've personally done that. I get so excited. I'm like, wow, someone's on the same page as me. They're into spirituality. They at least know what yoga is. They, they're seeing things from a different set of eyes, and that's great and everything. But if it's used for manipulation or anything like that, then it can be really, really, really unhealthy. And I'm not naming any names, but there are people out there that are in the community, famous people, and I feel like they just take it just a little too far, and it begins to be a sort of manipulation, because people want to belong, people want to fit in, people want comforting thoughts our souls go on. So it's easy to kind of go down the rabbit hole, which is fine, but you have to stay grounded and enjoy this human experience as well. You can't start being snobby to the people you're dating. You can't just, if the person you're dating has emotions, you can't just say, well, that's all your ego. Even if that's true, you can't just dismiss human emotion. And I know Abraham Hicks talks about this, where your emotions are actually your guide. You cannot dismiss your ego. You don't want it to get out of control with this spiritual stuff. It's your ego is like a passenger that's riding with you in this human experience, in this reality that you're experiencing, however you want to believe that's happening. So sometimes when you meet other spiritually evolved people, what happens is you have all this great stuff to bond on, and you have this whole relationship in your head. But then if something real life happens and emotions happen, they just completely distance themselves from you, or they're lying or manipulative or use language to manipulate people. It can get really intense. So I want you to be aware of that. It's great to be spiritual. It's great to get into all this. It's a wonderful hobby. It's fascinating. I believe in a lot of it. And I don't think the original people that were starting to tap into this were wanting it to get out of control. Because if you look at all the ancient teachings, it's just across the board not to let your ego get out of control. But you need that duality. You need that ego as well as your higher self. Okay, there's a checks and balances. So if you're hanging out with someone and dating someone and they're spiritual, but you notice a manipulation, yes, that might be something in your ego. That might be one of your limiting beliefs. But don't let someone else who's spiritual start to talk you out of something if it doesn't feel right to you. You know, if someone's being shady, they're being shady regardless of whether they're spiritually evolved or not. And I don't like seeing people use this whole spiritual thing as a way of manipulation. I mean, it's a fascinating topic, but you gotta kind of leave things open. Like, this is one of the possibilities, because we truly don't really know. We all have our beliefs, and that kind of creates our reality, but our ego is part of our reality. And it's an essential part. And anyone who just snubs off all your feelings and emotions as purely ego and dismisses them has got some major inner work to do. I don't care how many degrees they have or how spiritually evolved they are. If someone's going around not being nice to other people because they think the people secretly are all ego and they're somehow superior, that's a very toxic situation. I would rather hang out or date somebody who had no idea about this and maybe wanted to get into it than somebody who was all into it just like me, and we could talk for hours and hours, but they were really like, there was cognitive dissonance there. Okay, everyone experiences certain levels of dissonance, but somebody who just dismisses everything and acts kind of recklessly in their own manipulative way because they're spiritually woke, that person probably needs more counseling than all of us put together, because that person is afraid of, almost like afraid of true human experience, true intimacy. Everything's about the higher self. Everything is like, so you could tell them like, you know, oh, I'm about to be out on the street, and they'll just say, well, what is your ego doing about it? What are you doing about it? And like, that is not going to help anyone. So if you find yourself preaching to people and not actually lending a helping hand and not being compassionate to people you're dating and things like that, then it's possible that you have this spiritual ego. And it's a natural progression of spiritually awakening no matter what. I've seen Christians do it. I've seen spiritualists do it. I've seen people for the law of attraction do it. Everybody, every single walk. So whatever your path is, whatever your, you know, divine feelings are, even if you're an atheist, you can go too far with it. As a vegan and vegetarian, I've seen it in the community. Even just with, you know, people just arguing instead of getting their point across peacefully. I believe there's a way to kind of like help people out while still caring about their emotions, even if you're spiritual. So if you find yourself being hoity-toity or talking to someone who's dismissing you, yet you can talk for hours on ends about spirituality, I'm sorry, but I'd rather see you as someone who's not as spiritual. Because somebody who's parading around, giving advice, talking about law of attraction, doing all these great positive things, but not following it in their real life, that's scary. That's like a couple personalities going on there. So I mean, you really have to watch out for that. And there's plenty of great positive people who are still grounded. Remember, someone can say they're grounded and not be grounded. And what I want you to do when you're dating someone, especially in the spiritual community or just in general, even if the person isn't spiritual, what I want you to look for is how they treat you in between hanging out. Do they communicate with you? Are they keeping the conversation going? When you're around them and you have a problem with them, do they answer the question or do they avoid it? If you have a really big thing going on and you're emotional about it, you talk about it, do they start talking about your ego only and making you feel this small? I'm sorry, but even those people cannot completely, I don't care what they say, they cannot completely separate from their ego. Even though we have higher selves and there's, you know, the spiritual realm or heaven or whatever you want to call it, we're still having a human experience. We still lose people we're close to. We still get illnesses. We still have things going on. So even if our mind is creating a lot of this, it doesn't give people the right to go around and act like they're so much better just because they're spiritual. That is not how you spread the message. And if you're in a spiritual dating situation and you think, oh, this person's so good for me because they do the same type of yoga and the same type of meditation, you really need to look beyond that. Because the spiritual ego can be a really, really big problem. So if you found this video helpful and you've ran into people like this, let me know below in the comments. And remember, none of us are better than anyone else. You know, we can't use the knowledge that we attain to sort of talk down to people. We can't use it to manipulate people, because if we do, sure we can, but if we do, in the end, karma is going to come back. So I'm just a little frustrated myself. Having been dating in the spiritual community, I think that some people go too far. And I think even in this community, you need to look out for the manipulative tendencies, the disassociation, the non-committal attitudes. things like that. And if you feel like you could talk to them for hours and hours and even like co-create with them and have all these great spiritual things, but you feel like they don't care about your feelings and they talk down to you and they somehow make it about you, it's like this weird manipulation because you have all this stuff in common. So you go, huh, maybe it is just my ego. But really, if you look deeper, it's a little more than that. So we're all here on earth having a human experience. That's the bottom line. Even if you are very spiritual, you need someone who's going to hug you when a relative dies, or if you all of a sudden, have to file for bankruptcy or if something happens. Like, you can analyze all day how you co-created that reality. But that is not the only thing you need in those situations from loved ones. You also need the human experience, the touch, the emotion, the talking. So if you're dating someone or friends with someone who's spiritually evolved, but they're not there for you emotionally, even though you're trying to like be there for them, I suggest you distance yourself from that person completely. And this is just a good reminder for all of us that are practicing spirituality, and no matter what that looks like, we can't just think that we're better than everybody else and just blame everything on the ego. Ego is actually a very essential part of our human experience. So everything's got to kind of have a balance, and if you find yourself dating someone like this, I suggest you run. You don't have to make a big thing out of it, and I know it's tempting to want to like tell someone off, and it's fine if you want to say your piece, but it's a losing situation. Anyone who's going to get close to you on things you have in common and then be a spiritual snob, all while saying they're not, but somebody that just doesn't connect, it's like they're deeply afraid of intimacy. And that's like a whole other issue. So I don't think Abraham Hicks or any of those other people want people to get this out of control with it. So I just felt the need to speak on this issue because it's very important to me. Remember, if you're practicing religion, spirituality, atheism, whatever you got going on, don't be too much with it. We're still on earth having a human experience, and we still need to be kind and compassionate and work through the ego parts. Don't need someone pointing it out every 2 seconds, okay? I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please subscribe. And remember, like, it's great to get into things. It's great to be spiritual, great to do your thing, your jam. But don't start preaching to people and go over the top and use it as a way to kind of avoid intimacy and kind of detach from some of the uglier emotions of life. I don't mean you should like play the victim all the time and stuff, but sometimes you're gonna have a hard time and you're gonna need support. Anybody who's going on and on about your ego at that time and isn't helping you through it and is wanting to be intimate with you, that's really, really, really weird, and you don't want a relationship like that. You want a relationship like Esther and Jerry Hicks, Abraham Hicks. That's kind of more what you want. You don't want somebody who feels like they're your professor and they're gonna kind of like talk down to you and have a spiritual ego. So anyways, subscribe and hit the bell notification, and I will see you guys next time.